Good evening. I will call the February 17th meeting of the Jericho Planning Commission to order. Going over the agenda tonight, we'll have some time for public comment. We don't have any members of the public here with us in the room.
Or online.
Or online, so we'll see. We will approve our minutes of February 3rd, then spend a good amount of time revisiting the topic that we began last time, talking about planned unit developments, which is a type of subdivision development review in the Jericho zoning regulations. We'll be looking at those and hearing back from Chris on some of the things that he researched as follow-up from our last meeting. Then we will talk about the concept of housing incentives. So what are the incentives in zoning to produce certain types of housing and housing in general? Then we will hear reports from Chris Shaheen, town planner, as well as each other in our liaison roles, talk about any other business, and then wrap up in planning for our next meeting scheduled for March 3rd. Does anyone need making changes to the agenda? Okay. Then we will move on to public comment. Do we have any members of the public who would like to share any comments with the planning commission, preferably about items not on tonight's agenda?
I would, if you can hear me.
Yes. Hi, Wayne. We can hear you. Sure. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, Susan. Yes, I'll just take a minute here. I was looking over the minutes from last year. I don't think this is on your agenda, but there was discussion about farmland, farm blocks, and that, there were 6-acre bowling alley lots. And I would just wanted to add that, as I recall, God, this must have been 10 or 20 years ago, a lot of the discussion about why there can be a bowling alley lot in the farmland was that if it was farmable land, the idea was that a farmer could then rent that land. So, for example, I live in Sunset Ridge, and there's one, two, three, four, five houses on 3-acre lots. And if 2 acres of that is not part of the house, there's 10 acres that can be farmed. And nowadays you can plant things like wheat or barley where you don't even have to plow the field. They have these things that plug the seed into the ground. All you have to do is brush hog it or mow it really close first. So, but as I recall back in the day, it was the idea of shared land for farming, and not that particularly that one piece of land would support farming, although it could. I have 3 acres and I've very much thought about planting wheat or something like that out on my 2 acres in front of my house. So anyways, the long story short is I think trying to, I don't know, call attention to the shape of a lot in the agricultural zone might be a little misdirected. It's really the idea of potentially, is there contiguous land there that could be rented to a farmer?
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, then we'll move on to approving our minutes of February 3rd. Would someone like to make a motion?
I will make a motion to approve the minutes of February 3rd.
Thank you.
I'll second.
And Eric is seconded. Any edits, clarifications, corrections to the minutes? February 3rd. Okay, we'll vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say yes.
Yes.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstained? We were all here last time. Yeah. Okay, then moving on to the topic at hand, talking about planned unit development review. I'll pass it over to Chris.
Great. So the planned unit development review discussion is taking place within our enable housing discussion. So I'm just going to go through these initial first slides, cue our discussion. We are looking at what zoning can do beyond village centers to make it easier to build housing. And then this is being coupled with recent work by the Conservation Commission that looked at forest cover and how that might be incorporated into the natural resources overlay. So here's a recap of the charts that we've gotten from the select board. We are systematically moving through them. We've been discussing different aspects of these items since, I would say, late August, early September. So in addition to the PUD discussion, tonight our discussion is going to focus a lot on number 7, which includes an ask from the select board to look at incentivizing smaller, denser housing options and more housing types.
Which I'm just noticing is also number 6 on that list.
Oh, yes, yeah. All right, so I've updated our timeline for our work, getting us through the through May. So after tonight, we'll need to start hopefully wrapping up draft amendments. We still need to look at the natural resources overlay. We will benefit from having working groups working outside of this to work on some things, so we can bring some things to the planning commission that are a little more cooked and thought through, and some more feedback other than just something that I'm pulling together and presenting to the commission. So stay tuned for that. In terms of goals, this is what we've defined since we've started our work back in August. There aren't any changes. And then in terms of guidance, again, this is the same. Since when we've started our work, we really haven't added much to either the goals or the guidance since we started. Well, I'd say for the last couple months, these were getting populated a lot during the first month and a half, maybe 2 months, and they've been pretty static since then. All right, so for our first discussion topic of the night, this is continuing our PUD discussion, specifically when and where PUDs should be required, or we might want to require them. And what I'm hoping to get out of tonight's meeting is some direction from the Planning Commission, a more refined direction from the Planning Commission on draft amendments. So following the last Planning Commission meeting, there were several points that the Planning Commission will further look at. So one was looking a little more at the number of lots that trigger a required PUD review. And another was looking at zone districts where PUDs, where we might want to require PUDs. The third topic was directly related to DRB discretion. It's not something I'm ready to present to the Planning Commission to talk about tonight, so we'll be talking about that at another meeting. So we'll go through the information that I've got and then have a discussion at the end. The slides are a little different than what got sent out on Friday, so just be aware. You're not crazy or missing something. It looks a little different. Here you go. All right, so the first, I want to just put some food for thought out there is on the number of lots triggering a PUD review. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I just have a clarifying question. A PUD review is the DRB. Is it, or can it be administrative? Or is it specifically the DRB?
PUDs require going to
DRB.
the development review board.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the issue with the review is that it's potentially onerous? Or why is, I guess part of my question when I was reading this is, is there a reason to not just have everything be reviewed? Is it that onerous?
So the PUD process requires 3 specific meetings. I think it's like sketch, concept, and final. They can be compressed, so it doesn't have to be 3 meetings. I think the biggest, the most significant difference of going through PUD is that for most of the districts, there's a open space set aside requirement. 25% in the village and 50% in the low density residential, rural ag, and forestry districts. There's also a list of objectives that when you go through PUD, you're expected to achieve at least one of those objectives.
Yeah.
And that can be clustering or energy efficiency.
And do we think that the zoning administrator would not be able to manage that?
It's not something that we've discussed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, typically planned unit developments, I don't know of any planned unit developments that are reviewed administrative.
Okay.
Plus, Chris Flynn didn't, well, he also recommended that subdivision reviews stay with the DRB. We talked
Yeah.
about that last time when we were in the middle of the
Yeah.
bylaw modernization grant with David White, and David White raised the question of whether a minor subdivision could be reviewed by the zoning administrator and boundary line adjustments.
Yeah.
And Chris Flynn's recommendation was, yes, the zoning administrator can and should be able to review boundary line adjustments, but he still thought it was important that a subdivision, even a minor subdivision, go to the DRB. So I would highly
Okay.
doubt that he would want PUD to not go to the DRB.
And when we're thinking about this, it's not a question of like a big PUD has to go to DRB, but a small one could go to zoning administrator. It's when we're talking about like the size, the scale of the impact. If we said that a small development, 2 to 3 lots, did not have to go to review, it means it's not going to be a PUD.
Correct.
Okay.
And what I have seen in towns that have done away with a PUD requirement is they will adopt more specific regulations that achieve the goals that you would typically get from a PUD. So for example, you can't do a PUD in the Riverside Village District where we have the form-based code and we have much more specific guidelines on road layout and how roads should connect to other roads and lot sizes and design criteria.
And there's not the open space requirement, and there's not.
Correct.
Right. Okay.
Can I ask one more clarifying question? Just because I thought there was one other thing that Chris Flynn mentioned last time. And it was in the context of what we heard from our neighbor who was Martha Prince, feeling frustrated. Which I thought that I understood that if you have a PUD as opposed to a subdivision, that you then you have to plan out what's going to happen with all the rest of your land and not just the one piece. And that was an additional hurdle. But I don't know if I understood that correctly. I don't know that it's applicable. I'm just not really sure where to put that piece of residual information, if that is true.
I think that was stated at the last meeting. I know when I did the review of the PUDs for the last 6 years, some of them are a lot less complicated
Okay.
and don't have, it's not, I don't think, I have to double check, but I don't believe there's like a requirement that you have to have an engineering survey on your site.
Okay, thank you, because that was one of, I just remember asking Kristen, like, what additional hurdles or layers does it add?
Yeah, I mean, most people do, and there's certainly benefits
Okay.
from doing it, but the one PUD that we looked at that was down on Snipe Island Road, I think it was just a 2-lot subdivision, but they wanted the smaller lots. There was much less documentation associated with that. It was more of a site plan that showed the area that was set aside. So I think that would be, if that's something that's a question to pursue, I can get more information on that.
Well, I think it's just if we're going to say something needs a PUD, I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
understand the layers that requires upon someone, and or can we reduce the layers in a way that makes sense?
One thing I could feel I can say with confidence is if you do have a open space set aside, you probably and you're just a resident or a developer, you probably will need or would benefit from some sort of legal counsel and setting up whatever that deed restriction is or whatever the language is that is required to.
Okay, so that is an additional.
Yes, that would
something.
be one thing I would.
Okay.
Definitely is something that would be an additional expense.
But the PUD regulations do allow you to think about it in phases. So you don't have to have all the answers on day one
Okay.
about exactly everything that you're gonna do with the property and exactly every location of every road, driveway, power line.
Even to get the permit approved?
Okay,
Yeah,
It can be like to be TBD in future
for
phases.
future sub.
Eventually, you
Yeah.
can come back with that information when and if you were ready to do that further development.
thank you for the explanation.
These are all really great
Mhm.
background and context questions.
Mhm.
So if there are any others you think of as we're going through this, just pipe up and let me know. Getting back to this, so one of the factors that we wanted to look at was identifying the number of lots in a subdivision that would trigger a PUD review. I've put down some things for us to just think about when we're thinking about like what we might want to get out of it or why we're requiring a PUD in the first place. So the categories are on the left side, the factors are on the right side. These were just things that I have observed. So some of the factors in terms of why we would want to require a PUD is it gets, and this is looking at the assessment that we looked at back in November. They're really great at clustering in rural areas. They're really effective at protecting open space, either working lands, forest blocks, or habitat. Say you would get better design because there's more of a discussion with the DRB of how where you're clustering, where you're not clustering. Better protection of natural resources, which is thinking more at the system. Or in terms of the number of lots, we could think about how does that number align with other types of reviews that we have that are associated with number of lots. So for example, the way it is now, we've associated with a major subdivision, which is 4 lots. If you remember when we were looking at other towns, Richmond has set their trigger for PUDs at 9 lots, which aligns with Act 250. There may be other things, those are the 2 that I'm aware of. And then a third factor would be the scale of impact. So at what point, as you are subdividing your land, is there a number of lots that we can comfortably say this triggers a certain scale that we want to have a little more thought about? And I've broken that down in 3 levels. One small scale, which I'm pegging at just 2 to 3 lots. That's currently our minor subdivision. A category that I'm calling meaningful development, and I'll tell you a little more about what that actually means. And I'm thinking 4 to 7 lots, and then a neighborhood level impact, which could be 8 or more, it could be 9 or more if you wanted to associate it with 250.
Would there ever be a scenario where someone could use a PUD to do a single larger building in like rural ag? If they could, if it was a way for them to demonstrate that it would still be sort of in keeping with the rest of the,
You mean like a multi-unit building?
yeah, like a sixplex, for example, or
I'd want to confirm with Chris Flynn, but I don't believe a PUD gives you flexibility from the use table.
No, but it gives you, if you're gonna do a building greater than 10,000 square feet. That. That trigger, that's one of the triggers. We didn't look at that because it's not really necessarily related to
I think we dropped the 10,000 square foot trigger during the last.
PMG. Oh, right.
Yeah,
Well, if you had to Chris's point, if you had a 5,000 square foot building permitted for a single building, and because we do allow duplexes and triplexes and quads are larger, would you be required to have a PUD if as part of your build out plan, it was going to have 5 units within it, but still be one physical structure?
I'd have to go back. I'd have to double check the regs. I think the only square foot cap we have is a 60,000 square foot building. You
think
could
it
build
is,
a, you could
Yeah,
build a
should
single
have
family
mentioned
home.
that. It's a
Yeah.
rabbit
So,
hole. I'm
To
sorry.
Chris's point, could you build a single structure on a single lot or 2 lots, 2 structures, each one being a quad and not require a PUD?
If the quad was allowed in the district, yes.
So it's the structures, not the number of dwellings within the structure.
It's ask that again.
It's the structure, but not the number of dwellings within the structure.
That is what?
That is going to trigger the PUD.
I don't believe either of those trigger a PUD. Currently, neither of those trigger a PUD. I'm not sure what your question.
Well, it's in the ag district, and I want to put up two quads. I've got a 10-acre lot, and I want to put up two quads in there on one driveway, opposite sides. And I'm going to maybe divide it into two, or I've got 20 acres. I'm going to put two quads within each side of it and have a single driveway. Is that a PUD or is that just two units?
That would be a PUD. However, if you had a 10-acre lot in the rural ag district, under the current regs, you can do a single family or a duplex. If you went for the 50% bonus, that would only get you up to 3 units.
Okay.
So you could do a duplex and a single family home, and you could use the smaller lot size. So,
But you could do a PUD under the current regs and get 2 5-acre lots, couldn't you? With the density bonus?
yes, but
And do a quad on each?
no, your density is based on the parent parcel.
Hmm.
Because your 5-acre lot would then be under the minimum 10-acre lot. And your density is based on the minimum lot size for the district. Did that make sense?
Well, I understand it. I guess I'm asking if we still think that's appropriate.
Well,
It's a good question.
under what we've been talking about now, we're talking about changing the regs to allow a fourplex in the rural district.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant assuming that the fourplex was allowed, you could then do a PUD and
And then get up to 6 units. So you could do 2 triplexes. Or
so you couldn't do a PUD to get the density bonus and do 2 5-acre lots with a quad on each lot?
I don't believe so. Because your density is still based on the minimum lot size for the acre.
And the density is
for the-
only 50%.
Correct.
What is it?
Oh,
I
so
guess
that's another, we can come to that later, I guess, because I was wondering if we should increase the density bonuses, but
Mhm.
okay.
Susan's looking. I can't tell from the look if I've misstated something or if she thinks I've missed something.
She's trying to
or
figure
if
that
we're all
out.
way off.
I'm sort of trying to keep up with the math
Yeah.
and, it's a little bit different of a I could see why you're asking the question. Except it's a little bit different of a conversation than what Chris has teed up. But it does weave together previous conversations into this, and so it's hard to say like, I'm looking at this based on the current regulations, no changes. And I'm looking at this based on the new regulations, which aren't yet adopted, which we
Yeah.
really aren't sure exactly how they're gonna shake out.
Yeah, right,
So I think he was being quite precise in his
Yes.
answer,
right.
but
But at a certain point, one might question the density bonus.
So I think what you are getting into now is our second discussion.
Mhm.
Okay,
right,
Right.
about incentives.
yes,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
So
hold that.
Okay.
thank you for queuing that up, but we're gonna, okay. Great. So, any other questions on this slide? Because the next slide is a new one, and I printed out a copy so that everyone has it, but, I was trying to think of a way to help us think through the scale of development, this number of lots that would trigger a PUD. So I have this diagram out here, to help us think through this. Now, this is conceptual, let's just say that. I'm not sure I'm on the right page for my notes, because I don't want to make sure, I want to make sure I'm not mixing myself up here. Okay. So this image is intended to depict the scale of development by the number of subdivided lots. So each column on this page has the same number of lots. Each row reflects I'll say a different subdivision practice that's taking place over time. So the first row shows lots that are getting increasingly subdivided into smaller lots with multiple owners. So that would be one way a lot could develop. The second row shows, this would be more like what we were looking at with Martha. Well, not that you saw it, but this is more Martha Prince's scenario where you've got the same property owner of a parent parcel that's just creating different lots over time. And then the last row is just a coordinated small lot clustered. I've got this.
I'll see if you want one. I was gonna ask if I could sit in that chair.
Even better.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Don't have a ID.
So the scale of the original property in this, you can think of it in multiple scales. I mean, this could be either a 10-acre parent parcel that's getting further subdivided into 1-acre lots, or it could be a 100-acre lot getting subdivided into different smaller lots. And I think that if you think of it that way, that you could think, well, by the time you get to the 8 or 9 lots at the end, maybe that's okay in a village zone, but maybe that's not what we want to do in a rural ag or forestry zone where we're more concerned about continuity of resources. So again, this is conceptual and it's just intended to help think through this question of if and when a subdivision creates a certain number of lots, whether we should require a PUD. Are there any, I'm going to talk a little bit about, well, let me just keep going here. So for the small scale lots, which are a lot being subdivided into 2-3 lots, what I've identified kind of as the characteristics of that is that there's limited lot frontage that's being divvied up. So it's a spaced out development pattern. There is limited individual site access. So you don't have a series of curb cuts that are happening along the road. There's really limited opportunity to coordinate site design because you have so few lots happening on a larger site. And there's a limited cumulative impact beyond what's happening on an individual site. You're not really chopping up the site and chopping up the resources on the site. So for the next,
Sabina had a question.
oh, yes.
I'm sorry. So if you're on that orange text at the bottom,
Yes.
that is referring to the 3 rows for small scale
The 2
Three
The
columns.
2 columns.
and the 3 rows.
No.
Yeah, the 3 rows in
Oh,
2
yes.
columns, so
Mhm.
6 squares, the grid.
Okay, so the top row, I don't see how that jives with the necessarily jives with the direct access to existing public roads. Because you're cutting that into thirds, and the top third is really if the bottom line of your lot is the road frontage.
Got it. Let me walk through the
And we can
base
keep going and maybe
No.
it will become clearer to me, but I'm just wondering how that top row.
That's a good question. The base site is on a corner. So there's a street on the left side and there's a street across the bottom. So there's a street on the west side and the south side, if that makes sense. It's the gray line.
Yep, I see. Okay.
Okay, yeah. And then there's some tree cover on it and there's a little stream going through it. And the red line indicates property lines. Dashed red line indicates property lines.
Okay. Thank
Is
you.
it just me or is that
But it-
gray line really, really faint?
It's really.
It's faint. It's particularly faint on the
on the
left side.
small scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have missed it, so
It needs
thank
to
you for
be
pointing it out.
loud.
Graphically, it looks good, but I don't know
Right.
if yeah. Well, graphics are only good as they function. So that's the good feedback, and I'll blacken that before we post this online for the public. So that's small scale. For meaningful development, which I've categorized as 4 to 7 lots. Now we're getting into the number of lots that I think would benefit from coordinated access, so maybe shared driveways, maybe internal access roads. Open space protection can be thought through a little more because we're getting more lots and where the resources are. The development pattern can more obviously respond to environmental systems. I think our natural resource overlay is effectively doing this from Sabina's review, that it's pushing development away from natural resources. And then I think you're getting a number of an amount of development that really has a potential for shared infrastructure. So you could have a cluster of dwelling units that are say on a community wastewater system.
Mhm.
The last two columns are the 8 and 9 lot subdivisions, which I've titled neighborhood level impact. This is when environmental and working lands could significantly be affected if you're out in a rural district. Access and circulation can really start to impact adjacent properties, so you're going to have more conflict point. If everyone had their own curb cut, you'd have more conflict points, more turning movements. It'd really change the characteristics of the area. You might even have long-term road maintenance issues with more complexity with the number of curb cuts on a road. And at this scale, shared infrastructure and amenities can really help define a community. So maybe you have sidewalks or shared open space, or there's one community in South Park that has a swimming pool. I mean, you can really start to think of it at a different scale when you've got more. And also when you get to what's happening on the right side of the slide, you know, are our regulations encouraging cluster development, or is it allowing sprawl, which is something we care about? So this is a lot to digest, but I hope
No pun intended.
but I hope it is helpful in sort of thinking through the scale of development and how it could impact lands and specifically the number of lots. Are there any questions about this? Because next is really the key question, which is when and where should PUDs be required? And I know I sent out a good bit of information for homework, looking at the PUD assessment looking again at the PUD assessment that we reviewed back in November. It'll be helpful to look through the town plan goals. I think when we looked at that before, a lot of planning commission members thought that it had been really helpful. I think some even said it was the most informative information that we've looked at so far. And then the zoning districts, zoning regulations have, you know, specific purpose statements and PUDs, which we've also looked at specifically for the forestry and commercial district, but there are other that are part of that. So those were sort of like the 3 homework assignments to help us think through when and where we might want to require PUDs. So that is go ahead.
I love this. Really helpful. And I thought it was going towards the question, like one of the other questions that you had at the beginning of the slot, the presentation, Chris, was what would trigger the need for a PUD? Is it based on, like, did we set the bar right when we said minor versus major?
Are you saying about the purpose? Like, why are we doing PUDs? Is that what you're referring when you say the need for a PUD?
So there was a trigger point that between needing a minimum, what was it, a minor versus a major subdivision, right? So a minor subdivision, we said didn't need.
Correct, and that's currently how our regulations are written.
But the major does.
Right.
For a certain district.
For certain districts, and that I just want to contextualize this because this to me is about like how many units
So
on a
a
lot.
major subdivision is 4 lots or more.
Okay, is currently 4 lots or more. So anything that's in this major could require.
Right, from 4 over.
Thank you. That's what I'm trying
Currently,
to.
it does require.
Yes,
Right.
that's what our current regulations
Right.
are. And just to kind of like really sort of bring us back a little bit. The reason we are asking ourselves the question about the trigger is because Chris Flynn brought this question forward.
Right.
Up until that point,
And
all the Sabina reviewed PUDs, Chris talked to developers. We looked at minutes from previous meetings where we heard from Jim Carroll, JD Bugby, lots
so
of people
many,
talking
yeah.
about PUDs. And in general, the finding was that the PUDs were not that onerous in general. Most of the companies, O'Leary and Burke, who come forward, they all know how they all work. So when we think about the trigger, it's like, is this is an opportunity to confirm or question the trigger? And one thing I'll share with you is when Chris showed me this earlier today, it's sort of like, look at this chart, and what he said is like, look at this and look at it and thinking each square is 50 acres, right?
Yeah.
And then the next time you look at it, the square is 2 acres. How does that change your perspective? But put that question aside for a second. Look at this chart and say, I'm looking at this in the forestry district. Then change your perspective and say, I'm looking at this in the village district, 2 inches away from Jericho Elementary School. So that's where the trigger, when and where, it's sort of where, location-based trigger. Currently, we don't require PUD in all of our
Yeah.
districts.
Okay.
It's been stated that we do,
Yeah.
but it's not correct. The current regulations don't.
Mhm.
Are there other locations where PUDs potentially should not be required? But the reasoning really needs to relate back to the town plan goals and the purpose of the district.
Yeah.
And whether or not they are preventing things from happening. And Chris's assessment generally found that it wasn't preventing things from happening. But we want more things to happen in our growth districts.
Yeah.
Can we make it easier?
Can you remind us what, if Chris Flynn were here and he was looking at this, where he would draw the line for PUDs?
Interesting question. Their proposal was major subdivision, so 4 lots and greater, and in the judgment of the DRB. So they didn't really seem to he didn't seem to have. an
But how is
issue.
that different than what we currently
Yeah, I'm
have?
confused by that.
Currently, there's not the phrase that says in the judgment of the DRB, because that phrase was removed from a few
Oh,
years
in
ago because it
2022.
was had the potential to cause problems. It opens you up for,
But someone currently, because this is one of the examples, could, if they were doing a 2-lot subdivision, they could choose to do a PUD.
yes,
You can choose to do a PUD in any district except for the village centers,
Right.
where we did away with lot size and
Mhm.
density caps. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think I did a disservice on this slide in an attempt to an attempt at brevity, because I had initially had this as 2 questions.
Okay.
When should a permit be required and where should a permit be required? And I think it might be helpful to think of it as 2 separate questions. So the question of when should a permit be required gets at what are we trying to achieve through a PUD based on our assessment,
Mhm.
what do we know works really well with PUDs that we are achieving well? What are those things? So like I feel like the PUDs are really effective at setting aside open space because they're required to set aside 50% of the open space, and they're really effective at clustering. So those are like 2 things that stand out in my mind in terms of when would we want a PUD, when we want to protect open space, and when we want to encourage clustering of development. I don't know if there are other things that we would want, other times when we would want a PUD. I'm sure there are. Those are the 2 that stood out to me.
That is super helpful.
But we're not at this time talking about the specific incentives.
like the density bonuses.
Mhm.
No, because they kick in then when you either are required to or choose to do a PUD. So let's get there after.
Okay.
So
It's always available. if you
Yes,
decide to do
okay.
what you do.
Okay.
So I think
Okay,
we're trying to do triangulation, which is hard. So when you think about the town plan goals and you think about the purposes of the zoning districts and what we've seen that's come out of the, gosh, I'm trying to simplify it and just make it more complicated.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm asking? And it's a lot of,
yeah, I think I just needed the throughway from looking at this to being able to answer the question.
Okay.
And I think between you and Susan's explanation, I feel better prepared now to find the line, and that the question really is in which spaces, which zoning districts would PUD be helpful?
based on what we know,
Based as
based on
opposed
what we
to,
are getting from our PUDs.
Right. and that right now, what we know is that a PUD applies when you hit lots or bigger.
When you are in the commercial district, the low density residential district, and the rural ag district, and the forestry district.
Okay,
Not the commercial district, I thought.
It does not trigger it in the commercial district.
I think so.
It does not.
Okay,
Correct.
does not.
agreed.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
sorry.
Wendy, you look,
I'm hanging on.
your process.
I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In your professional opinion, would you, and this is not to put you on the spot,
Yeah.
but do you have an opinion on where you would draw the line on this chart? Like, would you move it from where we have it?
I think in some districts, the major subdivision might be a good place to start.
The one thing I would say about the 2 or 3 lot diagram is that, the upper row doesn't achieve our goal of preserving, forest blocks or, cluster development.
I want to amend my answer.
Okay.
I found this very helpful for myself.
Yeah.
And I really thought it really wasn't until we were getting around 5 lots that it really opened up the opportunity for more coordination, other than the 4. That was my reaction to it.
So if you would do anything, you might move it from 4 to 5.
That would be
Okay.
an alternative. Yeah.
Okay.
so that's the when versus the where.
Right.
That would be the when, yes.
Okay,
And I
following along.
have an answer for the where too. I mean,
If someone were to
if
ask,
someone
If
were to
someone were-
ask,
if someone were to say,
Yeah.
well, so Chris,
I think that, and like I've already said, that the PUDs are really effective at open space and clustering, which I think are really important in the rural ag and forestry district. I don't know how important they are in the village. And for the low density residential, I'm still processing that, because there are goals in the town plan about preserving an open space characteristics of LDR, but it's also where we've decided we want to target housing. So there's some tension there.
But in my mind, the PUD could be equally useful if we change the density bonus to incentivize density, in which case I would be more inclined to have it in the
right,
LDR or even a village district, because I think that could be, I mean, maybe our density bonus should go from 50 to 150.
but would you say that would be an incentive? You could require PUD, but someone would still not choose to take advantage of the incentive.
Sure, you
So-
can't, but they might be written, and this leads to another issue I have, which is slightly separate, but I want to bring up tonight, which is the Act 250, because that's cost Jericho by your calculations, those 4 9 development projects in the last 5 years could likely all have been more. So
Right.
anyway, what I was going to ask about that is, does anybody, if anybody agrees, does anybody think it would be worth the town of Jericho sending a note to the state and saying, by the way, we think you
That's
should consider moving the Act 250 trigger to 15 or 20 or what,
I think about it that a little bit like David and Goliath. And I
Sure,
think
but if
that-
every town said
Yes.
something, because it's cost us, if you said, if the limit was going to be 15 and there were 4 projects that were stopped at 9, that's cost us 20 housing units potentially in the last 5 years.
But what the state did is they defined parts of our town which are now exempt from Act 250.
Mhm.
So they recognize that Act 250
But
can be a constraint,
but remind me which parts,
village and village center,
but not LDR.
not LDR
Yet.
and we had our transition zones, which included the commercial district, so it's more likely that would be the next one that could potentially be incorporated.
Anyway, I just think that the state really needs to, I think the state should reconsider that. And I realize it's a David and Goliath, but if they heard from every town in the state and everybody had the same opinion, it might chip away at. Anyway, there's a distraction
Right.
from this, but
But thinking about that influences me to think about the where. And if the state is already saying that and I guess we have to, do our boundaries match exactly like our village zoning district and the 1B exemption area?
I think they are,
Close enough.
they go, yes,
That influences me to say.
they inform each other. They
Yeah,
informed each other as they were developed.
to say that for PUD to be optional in the village district, which is also exempt from Act 250, they've already eliminated the Act 250 requirement, then it makes sense that Jericho could consider eliminating its PUD review requirement, and that would double up the benefit of that Act 250 exemption. And combine that with the fact that what's on the table right now from this group is to reduce the minimum lot size in the village district from 1 acre to 1/4 acre, which is essentially quadrupling the density. So the need for a density bonus is also reduced.
And the
Wait a
need to do a
second.
PUD to get the smaller lot size
Right.
is reduced.
But I thought that Greg Tatro was having an Act 250 problem with getting started.
He
So
is because he's
is that
greater
before then?
He's greater than 50
Oh.
units and he's greater than 10 acres. And both of those are still the thresholds, so exempt within that district as long as.
And his
Okay, so
property in a
we
village
should send a
center
letter.
is
That-
unusual.
Yeah.
That there's such a large
Yeah.
developed property in a village
Sure.
center. That's not to
Yeah.
minimize this
Yeah.
issue, but
Mhm.
Right.
it's not I don't know how widespread that is.
I need some clarification on one thing. I've
Mhm.
been mulling this over my head. Can you have different triggers for different districts?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I follow up on that? Can you also have different triggers for different building types, single family versus multifamily?
Well, one of the instructions from the Affordable Housing Committee was to not regulate multifamily
Mhm.
differently than single family, because that seemed sort of not discriminatory exactly, but
But that
the
means.
regulation should be the
So
regulation.
then is it the structure or the number of units within the structure? Because multifamily is multiple units within a single structure
That's doing what?
that triggers the regulations and the densities.
That triggers a PUD.
Mhm.
So I don't think either of those trigger a PUD.
If you've got four, right now, four or more lots.
Oh, I see. It's the number, maybe it's semantics. It's the number of lots that trigger the PUD, not the number of units.
Right.
And
Within each-
now Act 250, it is the size of the lot and the number of units, but that is not how our PUD trigger is set up. Our PUD trigger is set up only as the number of lots.
Right, because it's more about site design and land consumption and flow and layout than who cares about what's inside any particular building.
Okay. But if I'm understanding it correctly, I can build a 5,000 square foot unit or four of them on a subdivision and trigger a PUD. If they're single family, 4,000 square foot or 3,000 square foot, whatever the hell you want to make it, it triggers it. If they're multifamily, but it's still just four buildings, it doesn't trigger sooner than it would if they were
Correct. It's the
single
number
family.
of lots that's triggered.
Number of lots.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And then the only other trigger we currently have for a PUD is if you have multiple units on a lot.
Multiple structures.
Multiple
Structure.
Principal.
principal
Structure.
structures. If you were to build two houses on a lot, that would trigger a PUD.
Yeah.
And my understanding for that is that's because you get into certain tax complexities, which are resolved during the PUD process, like how
What?
you allocate.
Yeah, he
How
looked
is it,
into it,
how is it tax?
like
structure resolved?
ownership and
How much
By
of the
the
common
DRB?
land you own?
by the legal documents that are.
The DRB is qualified to examine a legal document for a tax structure of a PUD?
No,
It's just the type of issue that gets worked out through a PUD, and I don't know all the details. I just know that that's one of the reasons to do it.
There's shared property in a PUD often, so how do you allocate the tax cost of that shared property? If I'm understanding that correctly.
Is this a rabbit hole we need to go down?
Be careful, she
I
has
don't,
a needle in
I
hand.
think we can pull back to the when and where.
Thank you.
Yeah, but I did want to follow up on one of Wendy's questions about do the triggers have to be the same
Right.
in every district? One thing to think about, if we did want to require it in the low density residential, that maybe there's a lot size associated with the trigger. So if there are smaller lots in the LDR that we want to encourage more infill, and there's less of a natural resource function to plan around, it's less of an issue. But if you've got maybe a 30 acre or 50 acres or 20 acres, maybe there's more of a natural resource component to take into effect that you want to think through when you're doing and allocating the space. So you could have a size associated with what triggers it.
Would there be a point we would be concerned about making this too complicated?
Yes.
Okay.
the other, in the interest of making it more complicated, the major subdivision current trigger says 4 lots in 10 years. And I don't know if you remember, there was a gentleman who came in quite a year or so ago, and he wanted to carve off a lot for his daughter. His issue was not related to PUD, it was related to this minimum lot in his district, which I don't even know what that was, but. And then in the example that we heard at our last meeting when Chris Flynn was here, it was a very kind of like slow burn sort of situation. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about then like a developer time is money, you know, they're trying to get things built 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years is like an eternity. It seems from the developer's point of view. So I was thinking about I think it also would have helped in this situation if the time frame had not been 10 years.
Mhm.
If the time frame had been something more like that I could handle as an individual, like a 5-year time frame, that would enable some of the higher row organic gradual without subjecting the land use pattern to chop, 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 chop. Like the literature that I've read does talk about the cumulative effect of incremental kind of unplanned, the cumulative damage. Like at the end of the day, you wake up in 20 years and you're like, oh God, if we had only known. And that happens to us, right? We have this MMU path and we have no infrastructure underneath it. And you're like, oh my God, if we had only known. So I think that's where the onus is to like plan and be holistic and be comprehensive. But on the other hand, if a lot of our land is owned by individual people who just want to carve off a piece for their kid or add a duplex and do a subdivision and not have it be like a Supreme Court case, that maybe a shorter time frame of 5 years was more realistic. That if it were subdivision, say Chris is saying 5 lots within 5 years is a lot more flexibility than 4 lots in 10 years. And just moving those two pieces, it's like football, you're like just trying to always get the first down. You moving those two pieces, and then when you combine that with reducing the lot sizes that we're talking about, like that potentially is exponential.
So would we'd be
Opportunity.
redefining what a major subdivision is?
Not
Not
necessarily.
necessarily.
We could keep that as it is and tease apart, have a different
Okay.
trigger for PUD.
So is what you're saying, basically, should we look at the timeline for development and treat something that's going to happen over 5 years differently than something that we might think is going to happen over 15 years?
Yeah, because over 15 years, you have potentially time to absorb it. It's a more gradual change. The land can recover from the development. Seems like subjecting an individual to, especially in the village district. I mean, I don't know, I like Wendy's question about should it be different in different districts, because the PUDs are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing in rural ag and forestry and potentially low density residential.
But
Also.
I'm hoping that we could get them to help with density more than they have historically.
The PUDs.
Yeah.
But I think, well,
Or you're saying maybe because we've reduced lot sizes, we don't need to worry about that as much.
Well, that's for the development growth areas. We have not.
Right.
We have not changed lot size in the
Correct,
areas.
yes.
Right.
Right.
I'm gonna, let me ask this. So is there a consensus of what we think works well with the PUDs? I've put forward the open space and clustering to some extent. I mean, it could be more clustered, but it is doing some clustering. Is there an agreement that those are things that are PUDs, that those are positive outcomes? Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
Are there other positive outcomes associated with the PUD that you can think of that I haven't identified?
It's sort of shared resources, infrastructure resources. Potentially limiting access to connecting roads as opposed to multiple driveways.
Of those things, do those more align with some districts than others? So,
Absolutely.
and which are those? I've already said it, but that was my thinking.
They're aligned with ag and forestry.
For me, it's LDR and up. So LDR, ag, and forestry. That's those are my three categories that I think they would benefit from. But I'm also in favor of parsing it out a little more in the LDR because it's not as uniform. Meaning different.
But there might be a different trigger for LDR.
Yeah.
I think I agree with Sabina. This is much better and much more suitable for the LDRs, the rural and the forestry, the areas that have more space already in them.
So that helps narrow down the where.
Mhm.
And then, and it sounds like there's general consensus on that. Okay. Then we get to the when. And I think if you're looking at the when and you look at this, you might think it helps you think about we're trying to think about protecting a natural resource and not fragmentation of land, whether it's a working land or a natural resource. And that might narrow what you're looking for when you're thinking about what the impact of the number of lots could be.
Except, you know, if I look at this page, I would, you know, like the small scale development, the upper row doesn't preserve the natural resources.
But the impact is, I would ask, it doesn't protect it, but how fragmented does it make it over? And it's really just a property line. You're going to have one house and maybe some outbuildings or something. So not that it has no impact, but
Okay.
you're going to have one house and outbuildings on 2 lots as opposed to, say, 4, 5, 6 lots.
Yes,
however many.
unless it's a 2 acre lot or a 5 acre, whatever we had.
Right, but now if we thought more about just the rural ag and forestry and maybe the LDR,
Sure. Yeah.
don't think of this as a 100-acre site as opposed to 10. How are you doing, Heidi?
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm pondering the when is the question, right? And the when is primarily right now about related to the number of lots. Right? So just the orientation. And as I recall, we had a lot of conversation last time, in addition to what you recommended, Chris, that maybe 4 lots was too small. That maybe it really did make more sense to consider it at 5 lots. It's the visuals aren't helping me all that much to understand that, which is why I keep looking at it. Like it's going to give me a little bit more insight, but it isn't quite, and that's okay.
Yeah, and it's conceptual and it's
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but I'm keeping up, and I think that if again the primary purpose going way back of all our zoning updates, right, was to make it clearer to both the applicant and the administrator and easier to move through systems because either it was super clear or because it was less onerous, right? And so I'm toying with the super clear and the less onerous.
Yeah.
And where is that, right? Because you can be clear and it could be more strict. Or you could have it more onerous, right? Or you can have it less onerous. So that's what I'm playing with right now.
Those are all like the right things I think those are the right things to be thinking about.
Yeah.
I'm sort of stuck on, I like the idea or the fact that right now the major subdivision aligns with the PUD requirement. It's just so simple.
Right.
You just know, you're not like, oh, wait, because then somebody's like, oh, well, maybe I'm not going to do 5 now because I have to do a PUD, then I'll just do 4.
Right, exactly. Could have unintended.
So I guess I'm a little hung up on that.
Also, if we do have consensus that the village district where PUD would be optional, is that's a consensus? Then the Chris Flynn scenario is resolved. because that was a big part of their argument. Their, the concern that they brought forward is that this lot is in a village district.
Oh, okay,
And-
gotcha.
I would say that that's what prompted the discussion. That's
Okay.
what prompted it, bringing it to us.
Yes.
The planning commission.
Yes, so that particular example.
Yeah.
Is if that change occurs, then that particular application can go forward without a PUD review.
Correct, but I think there's still a broader concern that that the regulations currently require a PUD without the DRB discretion. It just,
Right, that's,
just-
that's the second layer.
Oh, that's.
right, it just requires it.
Mhm.
Which is very clear if you're an applicant.
Right.
Mhm.
So I guess we'll switch this back to you, Chris. Give me a really compelling reason to move the trigger from 4 to 5 lots. If we're saying that it's not onerous.
I think there's a more compelling reason if you were gonna move it to really move it up. This like 6, 7, or 8 lots where
Right.
you're giving a lot more wiggle room. But I think it goes back to like, where do we want PUDs and where do we not want them? And if we want them in a certain area, then we should just say we want them in those areas.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I like
That's
that. Yeah.
my thinking.
Mhm.
I would be judicious and making sure I have really good reasons for why I want to require them in the areas that I want to require them. Because that
That's where
question
it's
will
really
come up.
helpful to have clear definitions of each district. I think we always have to point back for the definition of the district.
Mhm.
What's the purpose of that district?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what's
Yeah.
the best way to achieve that purpose?
Yep.
Mhm.
But one question we will get as a planning commission is if we're requiring it in these districts, why?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think we can answer the question, we just need to have an answer to that question.
Well, the current regulation requires it in those districts, so isn't more the question that we need to be able to answer is. Why would we no longer require a PUD in the village district,
Yes,
right?
that's another good way to frame it.
Which I think is a pretty, I could see a logical argument. It's Act 250 exemption. It's part of our growth district. The primary benefit we've received over the PUDs over the last 9 years is preserving open space. We don't really see that preserving open space in our growth district is enabling housing. So we're going to no longer allow it in that
Or
district.
require it.
Yeah, sorry.
I
Require
think you just really hit on it, Susan, which
Mhm.
is the once upon a time, the primary value that we seemed to hold so many of our regulations was about open space. And now, given as we've seen how it's played out over time, and so did it do it or did it not? And then as we've updated the town plan, one of the like a very pertinent and driving force right now is to increase housing.
But we,
especially in our growth.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So I think
Still
you
want
really
open
hit on
space.
that's the rationale for the change is that we have, with the update of the town plan,
Right.
we have shifted some in our priorities.
Right, but so now I'll tell you my my ambivalence
Okay.
is that the PUDs, as they're written in the regulations, allow a subdivider, developer, to allocate that open space to other uses than just forestry.
Mhm.
And contemplate open space in the village setting for community garden, playground,
Got it.
recreational use, dog park. So there's a part of me that yes, our PUDs have been very successful at setting aside rural open space, but they really have a lot, they could deliver greater benefits than what they're currently delivering, and especially public amenities that are well suited to a village setting where you don't want it to all just be house, house, house. Like there's a concept where, you know, like in New York City, every resident needs to live within X blocks of a park. Well,
Mhm.
obviously, we're not New York City, but do you really want to have to get in a car to go to Mills Riverside Park because that's the only place you can play soccer with your friends? Like there's a really nice little playground green space in the middle of Jericho East. Valley's Edge, we've heard from that neighborhood before, how much they value their open space right next to their neighborhood. So even though they live in a dense neighborhood, they enjoy a rural setting and land that they can cross-country ski on. So I told you guys before, I can make any argument. I
Okay.
can argue both sides of every issue.
But
Is
how
it
many,
the percentage though too, like, cause it's still 25%? That's still a lot
but how
for a
many,
park, for a smaller park.
And then I think like, well, then leave it up to the landowner or the developer to decide the amenities that are the most appropriate for that setting, but it definitely leads the town toward a more developed
in the growth area?
in the growth
And
area.
how many lots in the growth area exist today that would be big enough to have a little community park on them?
I think we looked at that there were a decent amount because from the wastewater task force point of view, we were looking at lot sizes that would be big enough to hold disposal sites and leach fields. And that was my question was, what's better use of this land, a leach field for public water or 30 houses? Which granted, you can't do one without the other. I realize that, but so there were a number of parcels. And there are, Sabina looked, there are some really pretty substantial sized parcels in the LDR, especially. But I know I'm talking right now about village,
yeah,
but you could extend that to the other. So that's the only thing I think about in terms of eliminating the requirement for a PUD in the village. Are people doing that? Not really. Is it really working? Not really. Are we all developers? No. Is the Jericho Community Development Corp doing all these great visionary developments? No. So, be realistic, but unfortunately, there's a lot of opportunity there for such great community amenities.
I think it's really different. Like when I'm listening to you, Susan, in my mind, that the difference between hearing open space versus community space. And so I know it's sort of, it's semantics maybe, but conceptually it felt very different to me when you were describing it. And so, and it goes back to what Chris, you've been talking about, Shaheen, is the benefit of the PUD is the clustered housing. So that there's some shared space. Like for all that it brings in terms of both the infrastructure for the housing, but also leaving space for shared community infrastructure. So you swayed me on that one. I'm just gonna let you know that did something for me that brought me back to Chris Brown's key question that he keeps asking. Can we get to more housing through incentives? The density bonus incentives rather than the PUD, yes or no?
So
Like,
why,
are we using the right lever? That's
Well, our density bonuses are available through PUD. But our density is allocated by minimum lot size.
right.
And so changing, especially in the village district, from an acre to a quarter acre. that, like I said, you're quadrupling the available density.
Right.
You don't have to be a PUD to suddenly
Mhm.
get 4 times the density that you'll be able to get in 6 months than you have today.
I want to move on to I want to get to the next part of the
Yeah.
of the
Mhm.
meeting because we're going to get into this exact topic.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's, what I'm,
I think you need to like.
right. Let's
Everybody stand up for 5 seconds.
Right. I think part of it, Chris, is figuring out which is the right lever to achieve our goals.
Yes.
Is it a PUD? Is it, or it, as you've been saying, Susan, is it the changing the lot size? Is it requiring a PUD, or is it offering bonus densities? If you put those three together, those are like our three levers as they are, right? Three regulatory levers that we have available to us. And we have the simultaneous goals of housing and shared community amenities. And it's hard to look at just one without looking at all three. Like I want, you know how I love a matrix. I want a little matrix of the three. Like if you check this, it gets you here. Like if you have these two.
I know how
people-
excited you were when Finley came with her matrix.
The matrix, just saying.
So
There's something
where
there.
I thought we had gotten to
Yeah.
is that we were good with PUDs in rural ag and forestry, and there was a question about LDR.
It's in the LDR that we have the question.
Okay,
That maybe there's a different trigger.
except Susan's recent argument.
Right,
Makes
but
me think-
making an argument that means that we should still require PUDs, I would just
But why not?
saying this is why
I guess it makes me ask
we
why not.
previously had required them, and something that it's an opportunity because it's not working. It's not happening, and
And Susan, you're just talking specifically about village right now.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And I just really, in the interest of like honesty and transparency and putting all my cards on the table, like that's what I think about and thought about and was like, well. But I think that it's sort of like, you know what you're giving up, but you still decide to give it up anyway. And I didn't want to be the only one who thought that way. Yes. To see if like that worth reconsidering, but not because I'm arguing that we should reconsider.
But could we regain some of those things in a different way?
Yeah, maybe. Right, like with other standards, but probably not now.
Why, in some of the areas you're talking about, why make it regulatory? Why not make it an incentive? If you do this as a PUD, you get more. So you're in the village district or you're in low density residential. And right now we're saying X.
That's something we're gonna.
That's
If we
I'm
were
gonna touch on that.
that's very different than making
Yeah.
it optional and incenting it.
Jim, I see your hand up, but I want to just keep going for a little bit longer, but I would really love to know what you think.
I'm gonna say, I think we have a general consensus on the where. And so then the when, and we have a narrow question of when. So we're only looking at what we currently require, the current trigger, which is lot size. We haven't talked about other triggers. We've just talked about lot sizes as a trigger. And I've
Number
heard
of lots.
number of lots, sorry. And I've heard a affiliation with the current 4 lots because it is associated with major subdivision. I think that's the right word, right? Like a warm feeling.
Affinity.
A warm feeling.
Affinity.
I would say there is yet to be a good reason to change that in my mind. And I like that it just seems sort of simple,
Clean.
clean.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I quite agree that it's working, but it is simple and clean, but it's not giving us the result we wanted.
Well, it's
Well, that's
doing us
the
what it
question.
was designed to do.
But we have all kinds of new things
Yeah,
in
that's
the
true.
pipeline that haven't had a chance to be
Right.
tested yet. So
Yeah.
we can't say.
Yeah, I don't want to give the impression that I'm like wedded to 4 or 5. I think it could be increased, but if you think about where you can start to really get a number of lots to work with to do something, I mean, 4, 5, or 6 seems to be the right number.
I would lean towards the higher number rather than the lower number to reduce the barriers for someone who's got an acre and a half in a quarter acre zoning area or a half acre zoning area who could maybe turn that into something quicker
But we just
without the
said
extra.
there are no zoning districts that would have that acre size. The village district is gonna have a quarter acre zone.
LDR would.
LDR is still one acre.
LDR is
One.
gonna,
proposed.
right, but what's on the table is to go to 1.
Right.
So if you've got 5 acres in the LDR and you want to put in 5 unit, subdivide it up into 5, right now you have to do a PUD, which is an extra headache and all of that. Why not just, yep, you're good to go.
So I
Right.
see, I think there should be a distinction in the LDR to say if your lot is smaller, you don't have to do that. And if your lot is bigger, you would get all the benefits of the PUD, which is the continued open space. So I think there should be a delineation and take into account that some of the lots are already smaller. And so they lean more towards village, right? And some of them are still big and they lean more towards the other way. So I think we should treat them separately, but they're still in that one district and we still want the growth. It's just getting at it a different way.
But I would then argue that the major subdivision should just follow along with the PUD.
What do you mean?
Well, if we go from 4 to 5 or to 6 or whatever, why don't we just move the major subdivision with that? I don't understand why you.
Well, Sabina wasn't talking about number of lots, though. She's talking about how big the
Acres.
parcel, the acres.
No, I understand that, but we're talking about,
You're going back to Eric's.
I guess this is Eric's
Oh.
point, yes, I'm sorry, but yeah. But I think, yeah, Sabina's point is a good one, I mean, because it does matter.
I would want to hear from Chris Flynn what the implications of that would be, like what we get through a major subdivision review. So major subdivisions are required to go to the DRB,
Mhm.
and there is a discussion with them during that process, which you do not have during a minor.
Mhm. Yeah,
Oh, actually, no, I've been corrected on that. All subdivisions go to the DRB.
no.
Yeah,
Okay,
You should go on to the incentives.
okay,
Yeah. Brains.
all right. Oh, did we want to?
Well, the next topic is very directly related. We're talking about PUD density bonuses, Jim. So do you think you could hold till after that?
Whatever it fits
Okay,
your tastes.
thank you.
Okay, so for housing incentives, what I wanted to go through is understanding what our housing incentives are in current zoning, but I also wanted to give an overview of some of the towns that I've looked at. There's very limited information on housing incentives just for rural areas like Jericho and Vermont. I did put together a survey. I sent it out to 7 towns. I sent it to Essex, Milton, Westford, Heinsberg, Shelburne, Charlotte. There's one other. Oh, did I say Heinsberg? I did get 4 responses back, so I have some information to share.
Before you start,
Yeah.
can I ask, oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, you go first. Maybe
Yeah.
it'll be the same question.
I just want to make sure I understand what a density bonus is. I did like a little bit of homework on my own. And it appears that a density bonus just means you can build more. It's not that you're getting any money, you're not getting any tax relief, you're not
Correct.
getting anything else. All you're getting is permission to have more things in that place.
So if
Is that
you,
it?
yes, so if your baseline density is 10 units and there's a 50% housing bonus, then you can build up to 15.
Okay,
Which is kind of like money because you're able to get more revenue,
okay,
right? It's a roundabout way of it.
okay.
So
And
wait,
whether those are more lots or more units, or both, sort of depends a little bit on your site, your configuration.
Okay, thank you very much. Just wanted to make sure I was oriented.
so my question is, so these incentives are incentives on their own right or incentives within the frame of PUDs?
I have to go back. Some of them are within PUDs, some are within conservation PUDs.
Okay.
Yeah, I just
But
did a
it's all-
catalog of housing incentives across the
But this
board.
is like things that we could ask for within our PUDs that would trigger the,
Yes, some jurisdictions have things that trigger a density bonus, not associated with a PUD, and I'll touch on that.
you keep
Mhm.
going and then
Yeah.
I'll, if I still have more questions, I'll
Okay.
ask again.
And then I want to go back to what the charge was from the select board, which was to update density calculations to allow and incentivize smaller, denser housing options and more housing types. And so just kind of keep that in the back of it. I'm going to come back to that later. So there are 5 areas of incentives that I sort of identified. So there's one associated with affordable housing and senior housing. There are some associated with diverse housing types. And then there are 3 related to density bonuses that really aren't housing related. It's like parks and open space, community benefits, and energy conservation. But I just wanted to put this out there so we have the full context. All right. Oh, and what I'm hoping to get tonight is just direction like, oh, our incentives, we're doing everything we can, we're in line with everyone else, we're good, or these are some other areas to look at. Because we may decide that our incentives are fine the way they are. All right, so this first slide is I already said there's limited information, so keep that in mind. It's like the best information we can pull together. So this slide's about affordable housing. Senior housing is one of the things on here. So most towns that I looked at, they all have a density bonus for affordable housing or senior housing. There are differences in the bonus award, which you can see on the screen. So Essex, they have in the last 10 years, they've had 2 projects that took advantage of an affordable housing bonus density. Both had additional 7 units in their projects. That both of those projects were in an area that had municipal water and sewer. So just keep that in mind. There's also a number of different bonus densities associated with housing type. So there's several for mixed use buildings, which actually we have in ours as well. Milton said that their density bonus worked really well for mixed use buildings. They didn't provide an example. They also have municipal water and sewer in their more built up areas, so I'd imagine that's where they are. And then Westford had one example of a bonus associated with a smaller housing unit. So they had a house that was at 12,000 square feet. I'll point out here, Milton also has a significant bonus for cottage courts. You can see up to 300%. They said it has never been used. When they adopted it, it was 100% bonus. It wasn't being taken advantage of. They increased it to 300%. I think they said they had like one developer that was interested in looking at it, and then they didn't follow through with it. So then just some summary at the bottom here of the slide. So of the 7 towns surveyed, 4 responded. I got responses from Charlotte, Essex, Milton, Westford. Together, these communities shared with me 6 projects that had density bonuses for housing within the last 10 years. There may be more, but this is what they gave me and gave examples of. Within that time period, Jericho, we've had 2 density bonuses within the last 10 years.
So Chris, are the examples here on the slide bonuses that were taken advantage of, or this is just what's on the books?
This is all of what they have.
Okay.
Yeah.
And again, this is if you're doing a PUD. Or this is for any subdivision.
I would have to go back and check on that.
I'm just trying to relate how this ties into what we just talked about.
I think one I can think that it relates to is open space because let me just jump ahead. So this slide has incentives that are associated with parks and open space, community service, and energy conservation. Like Shelburne, for example, and there's another town too, it may be Westford. The more open space you set aside in your project, there's an incremental increase in your density bonus that goes along with the incremental increase of open space that you have. So that is something that we do not have right now, which we could think about doing. There could be an incentive like if you conserve 60% of open space, you automatically get an X percent. As opposed, because right now the set aside is only 50%. But if you set aside 60%, maybe you get an increase up to 300% or something like that. Some tied their density bonus to community services, like a community wastewater for 3 or more uses. That was an interesting one.
When you say uses, is that units? Is that, or what do you mean exactly?
I have to go back and look at
Okay.
exactly.
Or like other projects, like
Yeah, I think it's like
our
three.
community wastewater could then service a new.
Yeah, I don't think uses is the right word. I think it's like 3 buildings or
Okay.
3 dwelling units. Yeah. Although I got no examples from the groups from the towns that responded of someone who had taken advantage of that benefit. The other is energy efficiency. Oh, and we don't have anything related to community service benefits in our regulations. The other category I would say was energy conservation. There was one town that had an example of that. I think that was Westford, that someone took advantage of a density bonus to get additional housing.
I think I'm missing community service / energy benefit is community geothermal. Cause you can do a whole you can do ground source geothermal for a whole development if you plan it out in advance. And that's something we're not taking advantage of.
Yeah, I didn't see any towns that had that,
No.
but that would be something to look at too.
Chris, can you identify on this page and the prior page, where were the Jericho bonuses? What were those developments that got those bonuses?
So one was Jim Carroll's project, which had an affordable unit, and that was worked out through a negotiation, and there's still ongoing discussions around that one. And the other density bonus was is it Plains Road, where it was one of the PD examples where they went from 6 units to 8 units. So it was still under the 9.
Based on
threshold.
energy efficiency.
I think that was energy efficiency. It's what they used to justify it. Because there are specific things you have to hit to get the density bonus in Jericho, and energy efficiency is one of them.
Okay. I just wanted to figure where they were.
Yeah, so those are the 2 projects. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
It was not approved with the energy bonus.
Jim's project was not approved for the energy bonus.
You got the other bonus,
Plains
the
Road.
Plains Road. Plains Road was the energy one.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Jim, correct me, so I believe the density bonus that you got was associated with the affordable housing dedication.
A stipulated final judgment, where we are in court right now, just to give you simple, that by right, thanks to the changes that you've made in the PUD, we by right have 8 units. We don't need a bonus legally because of the changes. You fix the error from 2022 in spring of 25, and then you did good work through September. So our position with the court, but it's not agreed to by the town attorney, is that we by right have 8 units. We don't need any bonuses. Stowe Club Highlands at Hildebrandt does not apply.
But when the project was approved, when the approval that is currently on the books, it's the affordable housing component that justified the density bonus.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
This was just some general feedback that I got from the towns that responded. That density bonuses, they work well for multifamily dwellings. they don't work so well for subdivisions. With the apply to like single family home or duplexes. Density bonus that, and some of these are just really obvious, like density bonus that do not align with the type of projects developers want to build, they don't get used. So, yeah. Developers' interest in PUDs are related more to flexibility in minimum lot sizes and setbacks. And at least one other town identified that their projects max out at 9 because they're also avoiding Act 250. It's not a Jericho phenomenon. Yeah. So here's what we have. So are there any questions kind of about my research about what I found for the other towns? Okay. In terms of what we have in our zoning for incentives for housing, there are some things which we've already done that I want to acknowledge. We have delegated certain approval, and this was done through BMG, the BMG work. We have delegated certain approvals to the zoning administrator. Minor site plan approval can be approved by the zoning administrator. We lowered driveway requirements by increasing the number of lots that you could do off of a driveway without having to do a road. And we eliminated lot size and density caps in village centers, which we've already mentioned a couple times. Other specific density bonuses that we have are associated with PUDs. One is a 50% housing bonus. There are other factors that you can use to justify it, but the 3 of them are associated with housing types. So if 20% of the dwelling units are affordable housing or senior housing, if 50% of the dwelling units are less than 1,300 square feet, or if 50% of the floor area of a mixed-use building in the commercial district, that's specific to the commercial district, is designated as dwelling units. So those are associated with a 50% housing bonus. There is a 100% housing bonus specifically for affordable housing when 20% of the units are set aside for what we call very low income, which is 80% of AMI in Chittenden County. That's an annual income of 83,000 for a 2-person household. And then, well, also this has come up tonight, but the zoning amendments that we've discussed that I think really get at that density question that was on that task from the select board. We've talked about reducing the minimum lot size for subdivisions, I would say significantly, and for PUDs, and that they'll have significant impacts in the designated growth areas, which is village commercial and the LDR. So that gets the question, do our regulations do enough to incentivize the smaller, denser housing options that we want, that the select board has asked us to look at? I will say, I think I've said it, I'll just repeat it. Some incentives in other towns that we don't have are density associated with community wastewater, cottage courts, and associated with increased open spaces in rural areas. But most of everything else, I didn't see anything that we didn't already have.
I don't think we have a density bonus for housing with folks with disabilities.
Oh, yes.
So that was really appealing.
Thank you for,
Yep.
yeah.
I'm interested in the bonus for the community wastewater. And I'm thinking maybe as a way to incentivize overbuilding the initial system to allow for future growth, either with ADUs or someone wants to turn their single family home into 3 apartments or,
The issue you run into that is that if you're to design your community septic based upon, say, 60 bedrooms, and you're only building, I don't know, 30 houses, 2 bedrooms per house at that point. So think of 10 bedrooms, 6 or 10 houses, and you're going to have 60 bedrooms in there because it's all wastewater is based on your bedrooms, not the actual number of people living in there. It can very quickly get capped out by the number of people that are already there. And then even though you have, I'm not saying it clearly, so let's use the example in a neighborhood down where I am. It had a septic system that was built out for, I think it was like 15 bedrooms. Put in, it was underutilized. And then one of the houses immediately put in 2 extra bedrooms. And the system was overloaded. So there was no opportunity to go further. And a developer, if you're gonna say you can build 10 houses, 3 bedrooms in a house, so that's a 30-bedroom septic system. If you build a 60-bedroom septic system for those 30 houses, we're gonna let something happen in the future. It's probably not gonna lead to new housing, and it's probably gonna get overused by the existing houses
Well,
already.
Okay, but you're still adding capacity. I mean, you're still adding bodies and beds.
Not necessarily. The
Um,
bedroom doesn't have to be occupied for it to count as a septic demand.
Sure. I'm not saying it would be a perfect system, but I'm thinking that there could be a lot of places where it would be nice.
What developer would spend the extra money on the system though?
Well, if they were incentivized to do it and they got, 50% bonus or whatever, they got, might be worth it.
I'm not sure, I'm not an expert, but I don't think the math would work for a developer. But if we could support the, I do like the idea of saying if you put in community septic, you can have more units. Your septic has to be bigger to meet the units you're putting in there, but you can have more if you do that. Not over capacity, but just capacity to it. If you could have 10,
How does community wastewater, if the number of units is the same? Then why would that be something we would incentivize?
if you get more units, I would say, not, if you have 10, if you could have 10 units in there and you put communities wastewater in, we're gonna allow you to have 15 units. You can put a community wastewater system for 15 units with 3 bedrooms each. Even though it's only zoned for 10. So 50% bonus.
So I'm not.
But having surplus on top of that would probably not work.
But if we step back conceptually, Susan, I wonder if Chris Shaheen's presentation seemed to imply that where more density is happening is where there's already infrastructure. Right? And so given that we know we don't have a lot of places that have a lot of infrastructure.
At this time.
Right. Is there a way for us also to use this incentive process to get more infrastructure in addition to getting more homes? Because getting more infrastructure, we are making an assumption is going to get us more homes. So it's a chicken egg a little bit. But is there any way in which we in parallel could use some kind of incentive that would create the infrastructure that allows more housing over time?
And to kind of back that up, so I gave the specific numbers for Essex, which had the 7
Yeah.
affordable units, which was the biggest number of the information I got. All the other examples that I got was like 1 unit here, 1 unit there. Not that that's not significant, not that it's not important, but the big impact came where you had the community infrastructure.
Provided by the town or when the developer decided to do a community wastewater system?
It was in Essex and it was town water and town
Yeah.
wastewater.
Yeah, so I don't know conceptually if it's possible. Because I hear your concern, Eric, about like once you put it in, then an existing homeowner can just fill it all up, but there's got to be
But
something.
if you just incent the developer to put it in the first place.
Yeah.
Then they can put in more houses.
Yeah.
And that's something we want.
Maybe this would be the answer to my question, which would be maybe regardless of the capacity and excess capacity, at least you've driven a more efficient land use pattern by not having each house have their own septic and had the developer go, oh, if I do this common, if I design it this way, then you allow space in the future for an ADU in the back or expansion in the back to add an in-law apartment or something to that effect. So that would be a good, like you say, a better design.
Well, I'm also thinking of the concept of a starter house. So
Yeah.
you get a young couple,
Right.
right now, they only need 1 bedroom.
Mhm,
But if they want to grow in place, then they want to be able to add 2 bedrooms.
mhm.
And then if the septic is already there, it's easy for them.
Mhm.
If it's not there, then maybe they can't do it.
So do you think the incentive we just looked at was community wastewater, but you're suggesting community wastewater with excess capacity beyond what the initial development will require? Or would you just
Or-
say like, just make it community and then you can get the bonus?
Or,
Shared, meaning.
yeah,
It doesn't need to just be wastewater. It can also be infrastructure like burying your electrics, having water, community water,
Well, you're
having your
required
roads.
for your electrics now.
Okay.
So, but water, yes,
Water.
right, but I guess, so that would be a question.
And we already
Like-
require them to have their own
We're
road.
over our skis, as we like to say in Vermont.
Mhm.
And maybe this is something, Chris Shaheen, you can do a little research on a little bit more. Like, we seem to be pretty intrigued with this idea, but we don't understand.
For the wastewater specifically.
Yeah,
Or a community.
some kind of-
Sort of shared infrastructure.
Yeah.
If that would lead to like better design, more efficient land use, future expansion opportunity. Shared wastewater seems like obvious, but and are there
Right.
others?
and let me
But-
point out, remind all of us that CHIP is now online and this could be a real thing for
Yeah.
real projects.
Yeah.
Very soon.
Sabina's had her hand up for a little while.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I know, so
I'm
speaking
gonna
of
try and take off.
I see, and Jim has been so
Yeah.
patient, and I also see that Wayne had his hand up.
Yeah, but he left, he left.
And Susan, if I could just add to your list, is one of the other things is an incentive is supposed to be an incentive for someone. So I think, Chris, like as you were pointing out too, there's the reality testing of that, like we might think it's fabulous, but if it develop, if no one's going to use it because we haven't thought of it from a particular perspective or it just doesn't make sense, and that's important ground testing.
My takeaway was that there are a lot of incentives out there that just aren't used. And,
Right.
and
Mhm.
I've gone back and forth in my head that I don't think that that's a reason to not
Okay,
adopt it because
okay. Right,
someone might, but I also want to be realistic and thinking that it's not like we put it in and we're gonna get all this housing because we have this great density above us.
Sabina,
I guess I'm still trying to parse out, like, are there actually two sets of incentives? One for minor subdivision and one for PUDs triggered by a major subdivision, or are we only talking about? Because what, we still want smaller housing on some of these smaller projects. So do we have incentives or are we trying to create incentives for those types of
Yeah.
development? Or is that's not now, that's right now is PUDs for major subdivisions. Yes,
Can it be both?
yeah, but I'm talking about
the incentives, the
tonight's
incentives.
discussion.
Right,
The incentives that you're talking about are for PUDs.
Correct. And I think if the lot sizes that we've been talking about go through for the designated growth areas, that would be unlikely for anyone to
You're
go
saying the
forward.
density bonus would kind of be null and void because
Right.
we're erasing the need for it by our
Mhm.
changes, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. We're low, so the primary reason people go through a PUD is for the lot size and maybe the density bonus. And we're changing that for the growth areas to the point where I think there'll be density left on the table just from the amount of septic capacity that they need for each site. If they don't do a community system. Which means that we're really,
But we still want smaller houses, right?
Yes, yeah,
Which is separate from the density.
Mm-hmm.
So how are we getting to that?
well, that might not be through zoning.
That might be tax policy or the homes for all, like here's your preordained architect's
Mhm.
drawing
Mhm.
of a ranch and you can just build this and you don't have to pay an architect and we know it works and it's out of the box and it's half of it's prefab.
And one of the things the select board is looking at are fees,
Right,
right?
right.
How that can be used to incentivize housing.
Right, so to Susan's point, like if somebody came, if we changed our fee structure and we said, if you're building a homes, an 802 homes approved design, then your fee is 0. Like, or something like so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I know it's $850. What I've heard, well, here's what I've extrapolated. Definitely interest in looking at a density incentive associated with community wastewater. I think going back to the discussions about PUDs, that there was interest in looking at density bonuses in rural areas that I would say associated with maybe increased open space. And then Wendy, you mentioned the ADA
Mhm.
designation. So those are 3 things I think I'm hearing to follow up on. I haven't heard anyone mention the cottage court incentive, which I know I brought up before, and there didn't seem to be a lot of interest in pursuing that. And the one example we have has a 300% density increase and no one's taking advantage of it. So
I think cottage courts are great and I would love to see them. I don't know. I mean, I'd be happy to include that bonus. I
Okay.
mean, whether or not it gets used. I mean,
Right, and how you describe it and how you regulate it and what makes a cottage court or not a cottage court. And I'm almost a cottage court, so why wouldn't I get the bonus?
okay. So I will look at that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like, and can you get that with the small dwellings?
I want to know how they got it in Essex Junction in that one place. Like, what was the thing that tipped it?
How they got what?
The cottage court.
The regulations?
Yeah.
Or was there so
There's
the
a
cottage
development.
the cottage court regulation was in Milton. But so I don't know if you're asking if there's a project that got built in cottage.
I think that there's something that resembles to me a cottage court in Essex Junction, like in
Okay.
the junction proper. And how, like, what was it that
Where is
enticed
it? What
a
project?
developer
Where
to
is
want to do it?
Yeah, what project are you thinking of, or what area?
It's like between Maple Street Park and Five Corners on, like, if you're going from here to there, it's on the right hand side and they're all red.
I've seen that one.
That was an infill.
So that was thanks, Jim.
That was an infill development.
Ah.
Pre-existing lot.
Okay.
Okay, Jim, you've been really patient.
I have some good news for you.
Okay.
One of the most favorite people we had in Jericho in a planning capacity, Jennifer Murray,
Yeah.
who is now the director of planning in Hanover, New Hampshire. And so she's running the deal. She left Middlebury where she was very much loved. And so she's now commuting from Hanover to Middlebury. So that's just a little bit. So reach out to her and say hello. You talked about the 10 houses that the governor has. We call those prototypes. We can do PUDs on prototypes with fill in the blanks. I used to do it retirement plans on prototypes. So you take things and make it simple. People fill in the blanks, and then you've taken away one of the major problems. You've also got all the good stuff, and you don't have to spend $30,000 on a lawyer. One of the things that you're not touching is the planning commission, but it is in work that you've done. You're not going to get anywhere if you stay with the same organization. You have an economic development corporation that is dysfunctional. I don't know that it's done anything, but it has a capacity to do things that other people can't do. And with all of the money coming from Washington drying up, the way we've done things in the past needs to materially change. I think you should have a director of planning and go rent an executive 3 hours a week, town manager, and say their job is to solve this problem and bring completed staff work to the planning commission, because The biggest thing that keeps you from having housing is money and law. The developers cannot, it's going to be harder for us to get money in the future, and it costs twice as much today as it was in the past. So if there's any risk to getting permits, we're not going to borrow money. The only people that will be developing are people who already have money. So if you want to solve the problem, organize around the solution. Give the executive function to the planning and zoning, and give executive function that pulls in economic development, puts a senior level person focused on achieving these goals because they are feasible. Also, the town has tools that nobody else has. And I'm going to just flip the needle. We put 380 grand plus a whole ton of expenses, time value of money between 500 and 600 grand is sitting dormant at Railroad Circle. I presented a plan, nobody listened, but the town's got the right of way. I can run sewer pipes, pressure. I could go all the way to Mount Mansfield Union High School relatively cheaply because the town's got the right of way. So forming public-private partnerships, possibly with philanthropy, goes under organization, executive function. Because if I can get money through a municipal bond at 4% compared to the 8.75% or 10.15% with a 5-year payoff, it's huge. Because if I can get to the muni bond capability of the town, and I can do that through a TIF district, the lots that I owned at Water Tower Hill were all through a TIF district. We paid off the bonds. So, but you need somebody here that understands finance, organizational structure, the way to take advantage. Now, we brought the town manager down from St. Albans, and he talked about all the tools that he was using, and we haven't implemented it. So we sort of need a czar, a mayor, which we can rent. They got him in Essex trouble. But there are people, today
Yeah.
with HDMI, Zoom, Teams, and all that stuff, I can hire somebody for 3 hours a week that you have to pay them 150 grand. They've all done this. They know how to do it. They just say to 3 people that work here, this is what you need to do. Report back to me next Wednesday.
Hey, Jim,
Organization.
bring your comments back to what we're talking about here.
I am. They're case on point to what it is that you're doing. Because within the PUDs, you can solve, all you've talked about is infrastructure. You're not going to get to infrastructure if you don't have organizational structure to get to the infrastructure, because you need to get to the money. You need to get to the legal authority to run the utilities in the public corridors.
We are talking about our PUD regulations in Jericho, and that's what we'd like to hear.
And you're looking for triggers. So a trigger
Yeah.
is that you go to the Economic Development Corporation, the Economic Development talks to the town czar, and they say, no problem. We will make municipal bond funds available for the infrastructure, finance it over the useful life of 30 or 40 years instead of 5 years, and you can use the public utility to get there. So you just step back and do it a little bit different with some blank pieces of paper and say, how am I going to solve the problem? And the biggest problem is money, permitting, time, and organization. And none of what you're talking about is going to get you to the solution if you continue to
So
do it.
you're saying if we have certain PUD applications that meet certain criteria, it would be in the town's best interest to potentially participate / subsidize / finance the infrastructure development of those. And that's how we'll get them bigger, faster.
And you put that in somebody's job description and you manage to it. You've got the public corporate, you've got the public works department, you have the Economic Development Corporation, you have a planner, but he doesn't have the authority, and his job description doesn't expand that. And we need an executive to help pull all this together. But if we really want to do it,
Yeah,
we can do it. But it's going to be harder in the future because we are now a blue state, and a blue state's got an X on its back. They're pulling back the money they already owe us. So
Okay.
there's a great opportunity, but you got to organize around the solution, and you just say, we're going to promote some people, we're going to give them a bigger job description, we're going to bring some capable executives in, and we're going to manage to the results.
thank you. Okay, any other things you want to say, Chris, or anybody else before we close this topic of housing incentives? No. Okay, reports.
I've got three things, real quick. So the Riverside, Village Development Standards and Fiscal Analysis that we got funded through a municipal planning grant. I've been working with CCRPC in finding what that scope of work is and talking to a potential consultant. So we're making progress on that. Whatever that is, we'll need to get pulled into an MOU that goes to the select board for approval. So that's something else I'm working on. I am scheduled to go present to the Affordable Housing Committee at the March 10th meeting, just to give an update on progress we're making here. I should also say, I gave my update to the select board on the work that we're doing here, and I think I'd say they're happy with what we're doing. They wish it was moving quicker, but they're happy with what we're doing. And then you remember Cam and Finley, in addition to the Excel spreadsheet that Finley put together, there's a report on.
Cool.
Right, so that I've been working with DEC to work through some comments that they had. I finally got approval of that last week, so that should be released and posted on this week or so. Those are my updates.
Okay, does anybody have any other updates? Worthy of a 902 time slot.
I'll put in a plug.
Sure.
If folks have not responded to the lovely invitation for the gathering of all the committee members, I think that's just super nice that someone's organizing it. And
Mhm.
I
Yeah,
would
Yes.
hope that others are also able to join.
yeah, March 20th. Thank you, Sabina, for helping to organize it. Spearheading.
I will say for the energy task force is showing a film next week on single-use plastic. Which should be very interesting documentary. On Wednesday night at the Deborah Rawson Library.
And then people probably saw the Jericho Town Library. They're doing their information session this Saturday morning that they're inviting people to. Can try to go. It will be. Yeah. Any other business? New business? So for planning for March 3rd, often we cancel the planning commission meeting when it's on the same day as town meeting. However, now the town meeting is Australian ballot. It seems like not too big of a thing for us to continue to meet. And since we're on a roll and we're in the middle of really important work, I'd love to meet. Can everybody still meet on March 3rd?
Mhm.
Okay, so we'll have our meeting on March 3rd. All right. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will second it.
Heidi seconds it. All those in favor of adjourn, please say yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was a
Thank
ton of
you.
work. I
That was
should have
great.
said this before we adjourned. That was a lot of work.